We have the video though.
Okay. Dang.
Okay. I know. Listen, the worst thing ever is when
Yeah.
you are recording and you're not recording.
And we talking about communication today. So
Yep.
all the stuff we just communicated out the window. So we're gonna have to rehash it. Okay.
Yeah,
So
so take two. Welcome back
this is our
to
first take two
yeah, this
and
is our
13 episodes.
our first take two and 13 episodes in regards to communication.
Mm-hmm.
Welcome back to another episode. I'm Candice Love. This is Soul Healing Podcast.
I'm Candice Love,
I'm Dox Diggler.
your boy, Brick City Boy.
Your boy. I keep forgetting that part. So go ahead and tell them again what we're speaking about.
Yeah, so this particular topic this week, it may not seem as juicy as some of the other topics we've talked about: infidelity, the fear of money, all these different things. And there's certain key words that a lot of podcasts get a lot of traction from. And communication isn't one that's super sexy. And I know in relationships, it can come up as almost like a cliche that communication is key. But we really want to dig into, based on some of the things that have happened in each of our lives over the past few weeks since our last podcast. We want to dig into the mechanics, the actual fundamentals of how to start to level up communication. Because to a large degree, language is what creates your reality. I was just showing you an excerpt from the brother Seven Bomar. If y'all never checked him out, extremely intelligent brother. Kind of comes across like he's a hotep, but he's not. He just has really dug into information, and he has libraries of information on the origins of language and how powerful what we say and how we say it actually is. So when you get to the point where you realize a lot of your undesirable realities are based on not just what you're saying with this, not just what you're saying with this, a conversation that's going on in your head all day that nobody else hears but you. We got to be able to get to the point that we have clarity over all three. And once you have that, you'll be able to use that tool of language a lot more effectively. So we want to be able to dig into that conversation today. And as always, we don't really like have production meetings, what we're going to talk about. We live, things come up. I think we should talk about that. So you've had three different instances of what you call karmic invitation. I want you to break that down. But you've had three different instances that we've been able to talk our way through, and how conflict has presented itself. And if you guys are fans of the show, you've known episodes where we, especially you, have talked about maybe your fear or aversion to conflict and how you're starting to recognize that and become more open to it. And when you do that, when you work that conflict muscle, your language muscle also gets worked. So you've had three opportunities since our last podcast where these things have come up and why it drove us to have this conversation. So just lay the foundation of what's come up over the past few weeks.
Yeah, so I've had three situations, like my husband said, where I like to call them karmic invitations. And typically, like I was saying before, when we refer to karma, people typically think that that's a negative thing, it's a bad thing. And I even wrote in my book, it's a chapter called Karma is Not Your Personal Assassin. And I said that because typically when a person utilizes the phrase karma, it's like, oh, karma's going to get you, or karma is a bee.
God's form of punishment.
Yes, God's form of punishment, as opposed to karma being this beautiful and divine teacher that is here to guide us and show us the way, the way that is here to help us heal, grow, and evolve. So I recognize when something continues to repeat itself, it is a karmic cycle. So for instance, if you battle with addiction, that is an indication that there is a karmic cycle that is present, a karmic debt that is present. And so when these three situations happen, that was an indication to me that there was a karmic invitation for me to really acknowledge that communication has been coming up my entire life,
Right.
before it to come up three times
Right.
back to back within the same week. Two of those times within the same 24 hours.
Yep.
That was a clear indication that this isn't just about people bothering me.
Right.
It's not just about people effing with me. It's an invitation for me to finally embody and own the fact that everybody is not going to be able to have access to me. And it's also an invitation for me to really own the fact that my silence is something that I honor. And my communication and the intentionality that I have behind my words is also something that I honor. And the position that I hold in my wisdom and as the guru that Source has put me here to be, acknowledging that I won't be able to share energy with everybody.
And even, hold your thought, even beneath the guru title, as a human being. People don't realize sometimes how imperative silence in those spaces to reserve your own attention to whatever's going on within you. That's necessary for all of us, but most of us are in such of a program of downloading information outside of ourselves. When somebody says, I don't got it in me to talk right now, and I may not have it in me for the next day, week, whatever it is, we have aversion to that. I just wanted to throw that in there. It's beyond guru. It's a human thing that a lot of us overlook.
Right. And because it is beyond or just a human thing, when people are operating in their humanness, they don't have the ability to understand or see when someone is operating in their spirituality.
Right.
Because they are looking at it from a place of just being human. Like, I want to talk to you. It's disrespectful for you to not text me back. It's disrespectful for you to not answer the phone.
Right.
And they don't acknowledge, like, this person is really tapped into their spirit right now. They need to recharge their soul right now. The only way that they can hear their wisdom is to operate in complete silence for the next 2 weeks, maybe the next 2 months, maybe the next 2 years. And so when a person is operating in their human space, they don't even respect the boundary of this person is really in their solitude. And that's a spiritual form of them taking care of themselves. That is the epitome of self-care, really being able to honor silence and solitude.
And another aspect, not to cut you off, it may not always even be we in silence or that silence is present. We may be having a beautiful date day or something like that.
Yeah.
And somebody sends you a text about business or they pouring their heart out. It's not time for us to be in that space. So you also have to acknowledge the times when it's not fancy silence. It's just, I'm not in that particular frequency right now to go there with you. When I enter that frequency, we can have that conversation.
Absolutely.
But of course, people don't respect that.
Yeah, and it's a boundary that we have to start implementing and teaching people how to respect. And then also understanding that because they may not have the ability to understand, that you may be the villain in many people's stories. And I'm very clear on the fact that I'm the villain in many people's stories for not answering my phone or for not texting back and doing things on my own timeline. And so with these 3 instances, one was a friend who I, had been friends with for a while. Right. And I recognized that she felt distant. Her energy towards me felt, really cold. And in honor of me practicing using my voice and adventuring into conflict, I asked her and I sent her a message. I was like, hey, this is what I'm feeling. This is what I'm noticing. Is there anything wrong? And she just kind of let me know that she had been mourning the death of our friendship because she felt so distant from me. And my thing was, whoa, why didn't I know about this? Like, why didn't you just tell me how you were feeling, as opposed to coming up with these scenarios and narratives in your mind by yourself and mourning the end of a friendship that I'm still currently in?
I asked you multiple times because I know who this friend is. Yo, what's up with such and such? Because I hadn't seen y'all like really vibing. You're like, nah, we good.
Yeah, right.
So you really was completely oblivious to what's happening on her end.
Yeah, I was so oblivious because in my mind, I'm living my life and, I have my own things that are going on. And the same for all of my friends. Like, all of my friends typically respect that boundary, that everybody has their own thing going on. And then when we do get together, it's lit, So having that dynamic and then someone now saying that it doesn't work for them without letting me know until they're finally saying, I don't want to entertain the friendship anymore, was like, okay, this is a journey into, conflict. And it's also a journey into me acknowledging, like, am I wrong in how I communicate? Or is this how I communicate? And is this an opportunity for me to just embody that this is all I have? And that's what it was. Not even 24 hours later, I had a family member send me a 5-page message on how also my communication don't work for them, you know? And so I had to just acknowledge, like, but this is all I have. And so I recognize with friends just want to feel present and have access. But family tends to disrespect the boundary and not know how to respect the boundary of we ain't about to talk every day. And then not even a few days later, a business partner had a feeling about not having access to me or being able to get in contact with me for a day, and came up with other scenarios like, well, I thought it was this, or I just figured you felt this way, like at least 5 different scenarios on what she thought was going on with me,
which wasn't the case.
Even to the point where she asked me at least 3 times, like, are you happy? And I'm like, where is this question coming from? And so I had to just tell her and be honest. And this is where knowing where you are in your journey and owning where you are in your journey is so imperative, because then you can communicate it to people. And so I just had to tell her that communication is an open karmic invitation for me right now, and is giving me the opportunity to even express to you in this moment that it is a karmic invitation, and acknowledging that a lot of people don't have access to communication with me when they want it.
Right.
And also acknowledging that when they don't get it, they do tend to take it personally.
Right.
And on top of them taking it personally, the aspect of the ego needs to understand why. And so it comes up with scenarios, stories, and narratives that typically aren't true to help them try to understand, why isn't Candace answering her phone?
Right.
Why isn't she texting me back? And so it typically comes down to you're living in a whole different world of a story that you created, feeling these feelings towards me. And it's not personal at all. I'm literally just honoring my silence and honoring my life and how I need to regain my energy to continue living my life. If I exerted as much energy as people, like, they don't understand how often our phone goes off, how often people text us, how people want us to be on podcasts or message us or need advice. It takes a lot of soul level energy to be able to pour into people the way that we do. And because we aren't boastful about how we pour into people, they don't really know what we do behind the scenes. So it looks like we just have our phones all the time. It looks like we're on Instagram all the time. And so they don't understand that there is real intentionality behind honoring silence, honoring personal time, whatever that looks like, honoring solitude, and then also recognizing that everybody say that they love solitude on Instagram. It's a lot different when you finally meet somebody that lives the life that they speak about. And people don't really always know how to honor that.
Right. And a lot of times, like I was saying with language, as a meditation teacher, I have a lot of distance from my own conversation within my head. And a lot of our stress is caused by the multiple conversations that's going across your ticker tape in your mind. So case in point, I could be outside on a lawn in the front, and a car drives by. The conversation happens in a way where a car drives by, maybe, let's say, a Lamborghini or something like that. There's going to be this whole conversation based off me just witnessing a Lamborghini go by. Maybe a piece of my mind would say, I want to have that car one day. Maybe a piece of my mind says, oh, that's nice. Maybe a piece of my mind starts to think about cars in general, and then takes us to the fact that we have to purchase a car very soon because our car got flooded out. You got all these different tributaries of thought, of language, of conversation within your own mind that comes from one piece of sensory information. This is happening all day, every single day. So it may seem like what you was just portraying is, to a certain degree, we are busy. We do got a lot of stuff going on. Even if you ain't got nothing going on in your life, if you feel like you ain't busy or important at all, this is still an integral component of your piece, being able to create divots, breaks in that constant conversation happening within your mind. When you start to understand how important this is to prioritize for your piece, then you almost kind of become defiant in anybody that's trying to go against the grain of that. I used to have the same conversations with my mother, like, look, I love you, but I can't talk all the time, even to my mother. Jesus himself, it don't matter who it is. I got to be able to create breaks in the constant conversation that's happening within my mind. And when you do that, you start to notice a few things, even based on the 3 examples you gave. I'm just realizing right now, too, you had friend, family, business associate, right?
Yeah.
Also friend, and you wouldn't have been able to dig up the information you did about learning more about how you communicate, acceptance of that. You wouldn't have been able to get to the point of also accepting the fact that there are a lot of people who need that, and that's okay for them too. I respect your universe as well. But you don't open up that nugget of information without the progress of going from a few episodes ago saying, I'm scared of conflict, I don't like it, to I feel something, right? What's going on? Just you opening that window that may have felt scary in the moment, I don't know what's going to come back. It opened up a tributary of 3 different examples.
Absolutely.
The source guide, however you perceive it, is extremely thorough. And when you say I'm open to this lesson, it's not going to come one way. It's going to come 5 different ways until you really hone in on what source is trying to teach you.
Yeah, it's like let's see if you really bought it.
Exactly. And if you're really willing to do this work, again, it's not just the burning the sage and going to the retreats. It's these moments where it feels uncomfortable to even send that text and receive that information back and be open to the fact people not bothering me right now. This is an invitation for me to learn. So let me ask you this, because you had 3 different responses to those 3 different situations. How did you know how to respond differently? Because in the first situation, you brought it up, you got the response, I'm mourning the death of our relationship, you didn't even know that. And then it was still a question like, all right, well, how do I even respond to that?
Yeah.
You did, you got out what you had to say, you left it at that. The family member, you realized it's not my responsibility, it's not helpful for me to say anything to this because y'all have had so many of these moments. There was no response.
Right.
And then the third situation with the business partner / associate friend, y'all was able to not only respond back and forth, but work through the nuances of the conversations, the disagreeable perspectives, and actually get to a point of resolution.
Right.
So 3 different situations. How did you know in real time which called for which type of communication?
Yeah, and so this is where silence matters. Because in your silence is where you are able to build a relationship with your intuition.
Facts.
In your silence is where you're able to build a relationship with your discernment, where you're able to build that muscle. And so with the first one, with the actual friend, I recognize that this is as far as she can go.
Mm-hmm.
I recognize that she had already tapped out.
Mm-hmm.
I recognize that there would take a level of acknowledging that she never allowed me into the process of ending our friendship. She ended it on her own.
Right.
And created the idea that I was the reason for it ending.
Mm-hmm.
So I recognize that she would have had to go back on that narrative to allow another narrative and take accountability for the narrative that only she created, without even having my side of the story.
Right.
I recognized in the energy of the conversation, she didn't have the capacity to go there. And so I said what I needed to say. I allowed her to say what she needed to say, and then I left it at that.
Can I say something about that too? Because it's a few things even going on in that. One, you were able to be tolerant and compassionate towards her particular process, even though it didn't include you. Like you could have got upset about that, right? You did not do that. Even in what you just said, you recognized, had I continued to harp on it, it would have been dishonoring the universe that she's particularly in right now, and I'm not going to do that to her journey either.
Yep.
And then the other aspect of it is being able to get to a point where you realize, if I push back against it, not only is it dishonoring their process, but it's taking more energy from my spirit. When my spirit is saying, I recognize she's at her point, this is my opportunity to exhaust possibility,
Yep.
say what I got to say. And that's a huge thing when I work with my clients. A lot of times we don't express ourselves, regardless of the type of situation, because we have an onus of, well, I want to be understood. I don't feel like this person is going to understand where I'm coming from or be able to reciprocate the energy, so I'm not going to say it. You already knew it was past that point, but you also knew I need to get this last long text out, not disrespectful, nothing like that, acknowledging where you are, but I do need to get this last piece out, understanding this is not going to rectify our friendship,
Yeah.
but I still got to honor what was in there. Go ahead.
Yeah, because I mean, if I'm honest, the conversation was on her part, in my opinion, was in circles, and that also let me know that she didn't have the ability to go where, you know, it would have been nice for the conversation to go. So my only job was to acknowledge how I felt. That was the purpose moving forward in that conversation was, you know, that hurts my feelings that I wasn't allowed to be a part of the decision making of where our friendship went. And also I understand that this is how your soul guided you to handle the situation, and that's what worked best for you.
Right.
And I mean, having communication, how I communicate, that works best for me. So my only job is to honor how another person needs to move as well. So I recognize with my own discernment that she did not have the capacity to go any other place other than honoring the fact that she has already bowed out of the friendship. Cool. Right.
Right.
The second situation with family, in the conversation, there was a lot of blaming. There was a lot of sarcasm. There was a lot of projection that had absolutely nothing to do with me. I mean, this message was sent at 6 a.m.
Right.
So anybody who wake up at 6 a.m. is ready to start some mess.
Right.
Okay. And so I'm like, golly, I'm trying to post this, you know, peaceful post on Instagram, and I get a 5-page message that let me know that this person is in a space that is ready to be combative.
Right.
My energy is not combative. Me not speaking, me not communicating in the way that other people want me to, or not allowing people to have access to me, is not a combative energy. It's not a personal energy. It is literally just me taking care of myself.
Right.
So recognizing that she was combative was me utilizing my discernment to remember, I'm not combative. I'm not upset. I'm not angry, and I'm not mad. So this is not a conversation that I choose to be a part of. And I've already expressed my boundary of how far I'm able to go in communication. So it wasn't necessary for me to respond because I wasn't about to say anything that I hadn't already said. That was the second situation. The third situation, I recognize.
And hold on, let me add something to that too.
Yeah.
Because in all the different parameters that you gave for what was coming across in a very abrasive, aggressive message, you were also able to see the crying out nature of it.
Yes.
Like, why won't somebody else, and for whatever reason she has been directed this towards you, why won't somebody come save me?
Yeah.
Why won't somebody come love me in a way that we got to start to be able to learn to love ourselves?
Yeah.
So a big part of what you had mentioned in that process of getting to that point, because at first there was waves for you too. Like
Absolutely.
you felt I don't know if anger is the right word, but you felt stuff emotionally, right?
Yeah.
And we was able to get to the point where you kind of termed it as communication surges, because you are becoming more comfortable with conflict. And in these moments, there are waves of very uncomfortable, explosive emotion. And I kind of compared it to when I work with people in my sessions who are performers or athletes and stuff like that. And when what we call nervous energy comes, if you have a concept that is bad, you don't want to feel nervous. You want to bypass that. That surge of energy is making you sharp, is making your mind go to a different level of computation. It's preparing you for what you got to do in that moment. The communication surge is part of what you used to run from because that felt so crazy in your system. Now you was able to recognize, oh, this is what this is for. I ride the wave of the surge and it takes me into the clarity of the situation and how to handle it. So a lot of times we aren't able to sharpen our ability of communication because we run from the surge because it don't feel comfortable. This is why we incorporate so many stressors into our life. A stressor is something where, like taking a cold shower, going to the cryogenic chamber at Be Human and stuff like that. We intentionally put our mind and our body into some of these types of situations to develop that muscle of being able to stand firm in that different type of sensation or that discomfort. The more you do that with the communication, now you recognize the surge is not something to run from. This is the energy that you ride into the resolution.
Right. Yeah. And so, let me see the notes, babe, because you got all the notes. I'm forgetting. I'm like, hold on.
You got to talk about the third one too.
Yeah. So, with the third one, it was more of a business conversation. This person and I are associates, but still close energetically. And I recognized that there was a lot of projection as well. And I felt the surge of energy. And so just to give clarity, I'm a Libra. So the balance, the scales, which also means that a large part of my life is attempting to acquire balance. And which also means the opposite of that is either I'm all in or I'm all out, which means I'm going to go off or I ain't going to say nothing. And so me responding and adventuring into conflict is me learning how to balance in real time. And so in our conversation, there was a lot of projection. And there was a lot of what she did compared to what I did, a lot of measurement. And I had to first start with how I felt. And I recognize that if I acknowledge how I feel, if I acknowledge the emotion that is present, it'll allow me to not have to protect myself. And it'll allow me to just show up vulnerable, even if I have to still be firm, which I did, but I still was able to lead with vulnerability. And so I led with, that doesn't make me feel good. It makes me feel uncomfortable. It doesn't make me feel a part of. And that hurts my feelings, right? I led with that because that's how I felt. And then also ending with, you may not always be able to contact me. I'm not going to always be able to be present for meetings about meetings. I'm going to need us to get to the point because that's how I honor my time. And I recognize that when I would bring certain things to her attention, she had the ability to pivot, acknowledge it, and understand how I felt and where I was coming from.
And vice versa.
So through discernment, I was able to recognize this is a person who has the capacity to have a conversation with me, to hear me, and to also hear that the narratives that she created are not true. And to let those narratives go if she's presented with opposite evidence based on what I finally share. So that third conversation was me journeying into the conflict, balancing my emotions in real time, the surge of energy in real time, and also inviting her into what my karmic invitation is. It is an invitation for me to work on communication. However, people feel that the invitation for me to work on communication is me answering their phone and texting them back. The communication that I'm embodying and allowing myself to acknowledge is me communicating how it makes them feel when they impede on a boundary that I'm not willing to change. When they are having uncommunicated expectations for me to communicate in a way that is best for them and not in a way that's best for me.
And being the fact that she was able to recognize at a certain point, as y'all went through the nuances of the conversation, you was able to recognize her capacity to hear the new information and to shift her perspective. And once you was able to see that, you was also able to come to a certain resolution. Remember, you was talking about, I don't have a problem as far as the meetings. Let's set a time.
Yes.
As opposed to just a random, can we talk right now? Because like I mentioned before, sometimes you're in a completely different space and you're not prepared for that business frequency. You was able to say, well, this is what I need to be able to meet you where you're at. She understood that. Bang, resolution happens.
Yeah.
And then the other aspect of it was, I think you talked about at a certain point, you said, because y'all started y'all endeavor more so as just friends trying to give something to the community. You recognize that the intention of that may have shifted for her, which is completely okay, but it has become more of a business thing. You was able to recognize, all right, now that I understand your intention, I gotta explain to you or give you more clarity that business Candace is different from friendship Candace, which we started this endeavor as.
Yeah.
If you want business Candace to show up, but she has a different frequency, she has a different tone, she has a different firmness. So I need to be able to prepare you for that, and I need to understand that that's where you want to go with it. And you may not even vibe with business Candace, but that's a conversation we gotta have before you kind of make a decision on your end that I want to approach this thing differently than we did before, which is okay. But we gotta kind of be able to set the groundwork. And you said something very beautiful. We gotta learn how to hear not just the person. We gotta learn how to hear the aspect of the person that we're engaging. Because like you said, friendship Candace, you may know how to hear her. Business Candace may be a completely different thing, but whatever aspects of a person that we're going to engage with, we got to learn how to hear each of those, and we got to have conversations about how to do that going out and coming in.
Yeah, and I think a huge thing is people love to throw out the word communication, 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 to the point it's exhausting, because first you have to recognize that people can only hear you and go as deeply with you as deep as they've gone with themselves. Right. And so when it comes to communication, we have to also recognize that how you communicate may be completely different than how I communicate. And so it's so unfortunate, it's so disrespectful, it's so unintentional to force a person to communicate with you in the way that you communicate, because that makes you feel comfortable. It's the epitome of being controlling, and it's the epitome of a person not feeling safe in their own world.
And people usually not conscious that it's controlling.
Absolutely. They aren't conscious at all. They just think that you are being disrespectful because you're not answering your phone and you're not texting back, as opposed to acknowledging that that's how you maneuver. That's how you expect people to respond to you, and that's how you respond to other people. But the way that you have a real relationship with somebody is you acknowledge what works for you may not work for that other person, and then you compromise and you attempt to meet in the middle. You ask another person, what is your communication style? People love to talk about different love languages, right? It's because speaking about love languages is a huge, beautiful, positive, hot topic to speak about on social media. But when it comes to actually implementing different ways of communication, it's very difficult for people to acknowledge that one size does not fit all. And there are many boundaries that come with levels of communication. So you may not be able to reach everybody, text everybody. You may have one time a week to have certain communication, but you have to get on the same page and ask questions. What makes you feel heard when we communicate? What is a way that allows you to know that I still want to show up in communication with you, but doesn't make you dishonor yourself so you honor my needs in the same process? Because that's not right. If I have to dishonor my energy just to make sure you feel heard, seen, acknowledged, that's not right. Everybody should have to show up in a way that makes them feel good. And when you bring up the topic of being heard, everybody hears differently. And so acknowledging with my business partner, it's a different energy. When I'm having to embody business, my communication is real communication. You ain't gonna just be able to pick up the phone and call me or text me. The communication now is, let's set a time, let's put it on the calendar, and we make sure that we meet what we said when we said we were gonna meet. It's not just the sporadic answering the phone, because now you're attempting to hold me accountable for a meeting that was never actually set. That's not fair to me. What if I have other things going on? That's not a reflection of me not communicating. I'm just not available. But when it comes down to certain business, a different Candace is present then, and you may not like that energy. But when I'm in flow, when I'm in ease, my communication is in flow and in ease.
And it happens when it happens.
It happens when it happens.
And even with that being said, like being able to describe your particular communicative universe or just your universe in general. And when you start to realize you like a dude or you like a girl or you like somebody that you can consider possibly becoming a potential friend, y'all vibing, and part of what needs to come up is, well, if we're going to be friends, I expect 2 to 3 times a week we're going to go out. I expect every day we're going to be sending some type of text, or I don't really do that, right? I go weeks at a time without speaking to people that I genuinely love. These conversations
Yeah.
got to be had as soon as you realize you vibe with a person to a point where you would like to include them in your life. And 9 times out of 10, we do not have this conversation. So you get 6 months into a friendship or 2 years into a relationship, and it's like, why aren't you doing these things? Because you never set the groundwork. You never set the
Right.
standard for what your communicative universe looks like, and you never got there as an exchange. You get this out from the rip, you'll know from gate if this is a person that beyond vibing with, you are actually communicatively compatible with. If you don't have this conversation, you're going to be left at the whim, and before you know it, your relationship is going to break down in a way that's usually going to be ugly, that could have been avoided had you described your universe to that person initially.
Yeah, and so I was writing something the other day, and it was just basically speaking about how we live in different worlds.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody does. Everybody has their own dimension, their own reality, their own universe that they live in based on their soul's karma, based on their soul's disposition, based on whatever their purpose is in this lifetime,
Mm-hmm.
based on them being in different timelines at the same time. People love to speak about deja vu, acknowledging that the metaphysical life that we live does allow you to live on many timelines simultaneously. And so every soul has a different disposition. My soul at this point is here to help guide people on their journeys of healing.
Mm-hmm.
Other people's souls need to work.
Yeah.
Other people's souls not even just need to work, but love to work,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I don't even want to say need because
Right.
I don't want to put a negative connotation
Absolutely.
behind it. Some people's souls love to work, and that is the catalyst to them being able to heal, grow, and evolve.
Mm-hmm.
That's based on the world that they live in. The world that I live in requires ease, requires less anxiety, requires no stress, and requires a certain level of solitude and silence.
Right.
If your world that enjoys working and has all of the nuances that come with working now kind of forces my completely different world to communicate with yours,
Mm-hmm.
our worlds start to clash.
Right.
Because your soul's disposition is completely different from mine.
Absolutely.
Your soul is requiring something from you that my soul is not requiring from me. Maybe
Right.
in another lifetime it did, but in this lifetime, what my soul is asking me to do is clearly different than yours. So now when we're in relationships with people, when we're in friendships with people, it's not even just about acknowledging the different types of communication. Now it's about, what is your soul asking you to do in this moment?
Mm-hmm.
And then acknowledging, what is my soul asking me to do in this moment? And then how can I make sure that I honor my soul? How can I make sure you still have the opportunity to honor your soul?
Mm-hmm.
And then how can we still work together in the process? How can we still love each other in the process without forcing one another to dishonor what our soul is asking us to do? And I feel like in many relationships, friendships, business partnerships, we are forgetting that we are completely different people.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we might have the same idea,
Right.
but we might have a completely different way of going about
Right.
getting there.
Absolutely.
You may have to be the person that does a lot of the back end things
Mm-hmm.
because you're good at that. It
Right.
doesn't require a lot of anxiety from you and you enjoy that. I may be the person that brings something completely different to the table, but we can still work together. We can still love each other. We can still be in a relationship. And it's about acknowledging, how do we allow these differences to still coexist with love and honor still being in the mix.
Right. And even beyond the ease you spoke of as far as your universe, the workers, which is different from your universe, but you still have moments where that's very much so the case for you.
Absolutely.
You also got people who their soul is in a dispensation where in this life cycle, they here to vibe. They're here to have fun and have
Yep.
friends, and there's nothing wrong with any of these levels.
Yeah.
But you got to understand, if that's your soul's dispensation for this life cycle, and we may meet at a community event or something like that, have a great conversation and hit it off, that doesn't necessarily mean that now you superimpose your particular universe over top of
Absolutely.
mine. It's almost like a shooting star or a comet going through multiple different galaxies and universes. It has just that brief moment to be in interaction with that particular universe before it's on and going. A lot of times we take shooting stars of people and say, well, we had this beautiful moment. Now you're supposed to be able to function in the universe that I function in, and that's just too much of an expectation. Is normally going to lead to you feeling like you aren't worthy because people don't honor your friendship. But beneath that is two different dispensations that has nothing to do with people not wanting to vibe with you. They just in a different part of their soul's journey, and that is perfectly okay when you're able to realize that.
Yeah, I agree. And I really feel like when it comes to these levels of communication in romantic relationships, friendships, and business partnerships, us giving ourselves permission to own where we are and not allowing anybody to use their expectations to guilt us to being where they want us to be,
Right.
doing what they want us to do,
Right.
responding how they want us to respond. And it really is like imposing on another person's world. It's like when I stopped drinking alcohol, and obviously going into my friendships, the circles that I was in, everybody drank.
Right.
Now I'm in a completely different world. It does not change or make their world bad less. It doesn't mean there's different levels or any of that.
Right.
It's just a different world. And so I would go out with my friends and the conversation would be, you don't drink? Why don't you don't drink? Like, it would be so weird to the point that's like, well, what's wrong? Like, why you don't drink? Like,
Right.
they were almost upset that I didn't drink.
Right.
And so I recognize that when you don't live in the same world that another person lives in, their mind has to try to find a way to understand, why are you so different?
Right.
And if they can't understand why you are so different, why you're moving differently, if they can't understand your universe, they do tend to take it personally.
And sometimes it makes them question themselves of, damn, why I don't do that?
Right.
And that becomes an egoic thing. Yeah.
Yes. And so they may take it personally. They may project onto you. They may even attack you as if you're the issue. And it's just because they can't see into your world, and they're not supposed to. You are supposed to have the ability to communicate what your world is,
Right.
what the boundaries in your world are, and how far you're willing to go, and how you only choose to honor your world. And so that comes with you being able to allow karmic cycles to be present. And that's what I had to do. I recognized when you were talking me through this situation, because at first I was like, just leave me the hell alone. Like, everybody want to, it feels like people are effing with me
Right.
in those moments because I'm emotionally triggered.
Right.
And so when I come out of the being triggered, it's really the recognizing that, no, this is my opportunity to actually own everybody don't have access to me. And I had to even really sit further with acknowledging, when you listen to people like Osho, Sadhguru, and all of the other gurus that have existed and went off into the Himalayas and really guided people through their journeys, these people would come all across the world to sit at the feet of Osho, Sadhguru, and all of the other gurus, to listen to them speak, to listen to their guided meditations, to be guided by them. I mean, they would, in their jobs, take their whole families and go move to India in the ashram to be guided by these gurus. And so the disappointment would happen when they would get there and they recognize that the guru was in silence for 2 months to a year.
And not accessible.
Not accessible. Most of the gurus, they don't even tell you the time. They just say, Osho's in silence right now. So when you are presented with Osho, he's just sitting there looking at you, and you're just sitting there looking at him. He's in silence, which also means that he's not speaking to family. which means he's not speaking to his wife, which means that he's not speaking to his children if he has children. He's not speaking to the people who feel like they deserve access to him,
Right.
that they want access to him because they're related or friends or people who feel like, you say you heal people, right? You say you can guide people. Why aren't you presenting us with what we need to heal, grow, and evolve?
Right.
So it was also me acknowledging in the line of work that I do
Absolutely.
with guiding people in the way that I do, me protecting my energy is allowed. Me protecting my words is allowed. Me protecting however I choose to show up is allowed. And acknowledging that when you are working in this field in this type of way, that people will have to acknowledge the guru essence of silence that you have to have so you can honor your own spirit and your own soul. And people love to say, well, who heals the healer?
Right.
Silence.
Mm.
Solitude. And that's the part. People love to say it on
Right.
Instagram, who heals the healer? But when the healer is actually healing themselves, because that's the only person I have the ability to heal. I can't heal anybody outside of me.
Right.
I don't even want to do that. I can guide people towards their own power of healing themselves. But healing the healer means the healer has to go within. And so we have to acknowledge the boundaries when the healer actually sets that tone.
And that actually goes both ways too, because I was able to communicate to you. I know you are fresher to like in real time hailing frequency type of work. You've been doing it online for a long time. I've been like on the ground for the past almost 7-8 years and have had to have a lot of these type of interactions, and I was able to interject to you. And I think this could be helpful for anybody who is in that frequency, who pours out a lot of love into the grid in any way, shape, or form. And when you do this type of work, that's impacting people's soul on a very intimate level. So it goes both ways where you're almost able to, well, not, you are able to understand why you can give a caption and a post and it revolutionize somebody's life. But then they may feel like, well, I just got this intimate piece of energy from you. I feel like I should be able to hit your inbox. I feel like you should be able to hit me a couple times a week if we have become friends. You still set the barrier, you still set the boundary, but you also have a level of empathy for the fact that God is literally flowing through you. People get a glimpse of that, and it's like, no, I want to hold on to that. So you're able to have a lot of sympathy and empathy and understanding why people approach you that way. And then that takes the adversarial nature out of it, where you feel like, well, why people keep doing this to me? Why don't they just leave me alone? You get a piece of God, you don't want to leave it alone.
That's facts,
Still
right.
got to set the boundary, but you do also understand it. And that kind of bleeds into the aspect of the all or nothingness, the binariness of disagreements and communication. A lot of times, like I put up a post, I believe like last week, we've been laughing about it kind of all week. There's the post where Candace is sitting on my lap, and I think the title of it is How Cheating Starts. And one of the main components of how I approach communication is something I phrase as landing the plane, right? I've been an artist for a long time. I've learned, I have a great skill set of crunching big ideas that would normally take a lot of words to describe into bite-sized pieces. Even in some of how I talk, sometimes y'all notice on this podcast, I'm running through a sentence and I get to the point where my mind realizes you said enough, but my mouth wants to say a few more words, and I kind of cut myself off and go to the next thing. Landing the plane is very important for me and how I communicate. So sometimes that shows up in my reels, and being that we have hour and a half conversations, I got to condense this into 90 seconds. I got to add captions and all this other stuff. So sometimes you don't get the complete nuance or the context of where the 90-second reel came from in the conversation. I still do a very good job of making it clear. But in this particular case, we had like 400,000 views on it, and 80% of the people were able to gather the context of it. But you got about 20-30% of those people who are literally upset with all the stuff that's on social media. They all are so mad that they're literally coming to this post using curse words. Like, I got to delete some of them. They're coming to the post multiple days to just hunker down on how it doesn't make no sense. They just talking to hear themselves talk. Cool. I say that to say, though, that when your masculine and feminine component aren't flowing and in balance, there is not going to be much gray area in conversation. It's either right or wrong. And when you live in that space, again, masculine energy, when it's not balanced with its feminine counterpart, is very linear, masculine. When you got lines, you got angles. If you got lines and angles, you got shapes. If you got shapes, you have something on this side of the shape, something on that side of the shape. Separation. Y'all over there, us over here. Red state, blue state, and it goes all the way down the line to the point where even in a regular conversation where I can accept, y'all don't get it, cool, I'm not in all or nothingness. But for people who are in that type of energy, it's going to be a battle. It got to be a war. No, y'all are wrong. You said this incorrectly, and it's pissing me off to the point I got to come to your post and continue to hunker down on it every day. You get to the point where you practice conflict. You get to the point where your language and your communication start to escalate. It gets to the point where you don't got to argue with nobody no more. I don't got to debate with you. Now, if you asking for more clarity on something that I'm portraying, cool. But there's no longer going to be a situation where I got to prove myself to you or go to war of words with you because I'm so much in my masculine energy that I got to prove myself to be right. Well, all these different universes, there's 8 billion people almost on this planet, there's 8 billion different versions of right. It's 8 billion different versions of wrong. I'm not about to get caught up in that drama. I'm going to relay what my universe looks like. I'm going to hear what yours is, but I'm not going to try to bind them together over the context of right or wrong. And that frees you from so much of that OPP, other people's perceptions. This version of me 10 years ago, I would have been going back and forth with every person on there saying something crazy. And even when I showed her the post, she was like, ain't even no reason to even go back and forth with these people. Like, it's cool. Y'all believe what you believe in, vice versa. But you get to the point where you free yourself from so much of that karma. You free yourself from other people's perceptions and how to prove yourself how you're right. And that is a level of freedom that opens your energy up to being able to really do what serves your spirit.
Yeah, and then especially on social media, right? So on places like Instagram and YouTube, what happens is people love to say that Instagram is not real. That is not true. Okay. If we have multiple realities that we aren't even able to see that we individually live in, social media is a very real reality, and it brings people that would never have the ability to connect now to have the ability to connect, which means that if I post something, if my husband posts something and you respond in a negative way, like I said before, I instantly know that you're triggered. So I know that you are in a completely different reality that is different than the one that I just posted. Your soul is doing a completely different span of work on your spirit that I'm not privy to.
Right.
So when they're coming back to the post and they're responding and I still don't get it, they're in multiple realities right now, and their soul is being healed. They're evolving in multiple different realities. And to a large degree, maybe in this social media reality, they're being tormented by the fact that they don't understand. And who knows what their trauma is from timelines ago, lifetimes ago, of something happening to them where they just deeply don't understand why this happened to me, where there's so much confusion in their life to where when they see a post that is even slightly triggering to them, they're like, I don't understand. I need to understand. So when we acknowledge that everybody lives in a different reality, it gives us the opportunity to not have to respond or take anything personal. But the other aspect of when you're in situations with things that you don't understand, when there's communication happening that you don't understand, it's like just recognizing that when it's time, you will.
Right.
And I recognize that there have been many books, posts, people, gurus, teachers that I've been like, I don't understand this.
Right.
And I've moved on.
Right.
But the spiritual maturity is acknowledging I don't understand this, but I'm not going to write it off as if it's wrong. I don't understand this, and I'm not going to write it off as if it's stupid, as if it's dumb, or if the person doesn't know what they're speaking about. I'm going to acknowledge that whatever it is that they're conveying is not resonating with my spirit right now. And that could totally have everything to do with me and nothing to do with the person. So I'm just going to leave this here. And if life brings me back to it, then it will. And there's been so many times where I've been like, yeah, I'm off this. I don't get it. Or this is too much. Or it's making my mind do too much. It's making me feel too much. 5 years later, I'm like, oh, I hear it. I hear it completely differently. I see the person differently. I resonate with what they're saying differently. If you would have told me people allowing themselves to just walk around angry 2 years ago, I'd have been like, why? Like, life is so beautiful and positive.
Right.
Why would you even want to waste your time on anger? Now that anger is another karmic invitation for me. I'm like, hell yeah. I'm glad you're giving yourself permission to be angry, right? Because it's something that I recognize is medicine. But it took me 2 years
to get to that
point. So when we see that people aren't receiving us, receiving our messages, receiving our words, receiving our energy, our communication, they live in a different universe. They can't. Right. Sometimes they cannot. Right. Sometimes it's not meant for them to. And sometimes it may take them a lifetime, 2 years, 3, 5 years to be able to actually hear you. And that's just what I had to learn when it comes to really communicating.
Right. And that writing off piece is really important, because once you start to open yourself up in the ways we are advocating, you start to get very intentional about digging up all the information you can from any particular universe you may be involved with at the time. So with anger, it's to the point where last week we going to the grocery store and I was just in a weird bag. Like, I just wanted to inflict pain or damage or destroy something. I wanted to punish something. And she asked me how I was feeling. I'm like, I feel like I want to hurt somebody, right? Docs, the meditation teacher, Brick City Buddha. Now, of course, I didn't go jump out on the street and start beating somebody up, but I was able to not run away from that wave of emotion.
Yeah.
Right. And we was able to have a whole conversation where I'm asking her questions like, if you could destroy anything in the existence right now, what would you want to destroy? And she's talking to me about, I just want to punch somebody in the nose. I want to see. We was able to dig into that information because we respected the fact it came up. Within 5 minutes, we back to lovey-dovey, love the world, la, la, la. But we was able to open it up. And if you aren't doing that, listening laziness is something that comes off of that, right? When you talked about writing things off. And you see this a lot on social media. We'll put an inordinate amount of information in our caption about an event. We're not the only ones. I see it all the time. We'll put an inordinate amount of information about an event in the actual reel, right? This happens at this time, on this day, on this date. As soon as you see the first few comments, all right, when is it? Right? And it's no shade, it's no knock, but these are indications that you may not be to the point where you appreciate however God is showing up to you, even in a social media post about an event you may want to attend. If you haven't taken the time to read all the way through it, if you have to still get on that post and ask what we just was able to describe in the caption, in the reel, in the post, this may be an example of how listening laziness is showing up, not just on social media, but in your world, with your parents, with your kids, with your mate, and how much information, how many nuggets you may be bypassing. Even with your own emotions, you may not be like really exhausting possibility and squeezing the juice out of the headphones. And this is why you may not know which job to take, which mate to choose. A lot of this wisdom you miss because you aren't at the maximum capacity of taking in as much as you can of the moment. And again, this is the point where I say why meditation is so important, because that helps you to be able to do that.
Yeah. And then, you know, when it comes back to communication, a lot of times, like our last episode speaking about cheating, we also bypass things that we may not understand that are opportunities for our partner to communicate with us how they're feeling. And because we may not understand it, we may brush it off. And so the average person, if you would have brought up, you know, that I feel like I want to hurt somebody right now, they would have really been like, okay, you tripping. Like, this is, you know. But for me to go with it, because that's not what we were talking about, right? You know, for me to go with it and then acknowledge, like, yeah, I guess there's a part of me that also feels like there's some explosive energy there as well. This is an opportunity for real communication to happen, to get a glimpse into what is going on in the internal world where when there is some type of explosive energy present. And so we went through that as a real exercise.
Absolutely.
It wasn't just like an unintentional conversation about us wanting to like beat people up. But it is a lot of people that I wish I would have beat up. And I finally got the opportunity to explain
right.
how I wanted them to be beat up. And he's like, so, you know, like, are they going to be able to walk the next day? And I'm like, they can walk, but I need them to walk with a limp.
Right.
Because I need somebody to say, dang, what happened to you? You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't want to mess up their face, but I do want them to bleed.
Right.
I want them to be able to, you know, I want them to feel it.
Crazy, yo.
So, and so this is a real exercise of communication, of emotion, and recognizing that when your partner goes somewhere, you may not have the ability to go there as well. Me and my partner, we, for the most part, we see on the same page all the time. So that was an expression that I actually needed as well.
Right.
I needed to be able to express myself in that way.
And you said you had never been able to openly have that conversation in your life.
I've never been able to say that I wish I would have beat somebody up and explain how I wanted to do it. And in the process of me, okay, I'm just making a mental note right now. In the process of me explaining it, feeling the versions of myself that wanted to just deeply explode on a person, finally being able to express that out loud, not being nice out loud, not being the positive person out loud, that felt so...
You gotta give me that on that.
Oh.
Go ahead.
That felt so good to finally just be like, yeah, I don't want you to be hurt more than 3 days, but I need you to be limping at least for a little bit.
F out of here.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? So, but I bring that up as far as communication to remind people that these are the nuances of communication that invite you into another person's world, so you don't have to stay stuck in only allowing or forcing people to communicate in the way that you communicate.
Right.
That was my husband's way of communicating. He had some explosive energy that was present. It was then an invitation for me to adventure into his world to see if any of it reflected my world. And it did. It reflected that I also had some explosive energy that wanted to be expressed. And so when we refuse to do that, when it's just like, I don't understand you, I'm gonna brush you off. Now you miss opportunities to understand a person, to see into a person, to really evolve with a person. And it's just like with crime. It's like, oh, you don't believe what I believe? Right. Cool, I'm gonna kill you. Bow.
Right.
You know, you rep a different set than I rep. I don't understand it. Right. Bow. Exactly. You got blue, I got red. Right. I don't like it. Bow.
All
I'm killing
or nothing.
You. Yeah, it's all or nothing, as opposed to acknowledge we are in many different worlds as we simultaneously sit right next to each other. And there are infinite opportunities and infinite pathways to God. There are infinite pathways that I can take to learn how to understand my partner, learn how to understand what he's trying to convey, and vice versa.
Yeah, I think the last thing I throw out there, I just had a couple session where a point came in the joint session. I do one individual and then we have our joint session to kind of bring things together. So husband and wife, beautiful couple, but at a certain point we were going through some of their notes, and she was talking about some of the things that she would like him to improve on. One of those things being that she's very good at noticing when his energy shifts, and she investigates. She'll bring it up. She says she wanted him to be able to notice that within her without her having to particularly say it. So she presented the request in that moment. I was able to recognize, okay, there's a request here. Before he was able to acknowledge the request, he went into explaining himself on the fact that he does recognize him and why he doesn't say anything, why in previous relationships it triggered his past partners and he doesn't want to ruffle her feathers. Noble cause for why he's not saying anything, right, which we both was able to understand. But in that moment, I was able to see something that I probably used to do in relationships, where when you in that masculine approach a lot of times and it's all or nothing, right or wrong, and you have a request presented to you that triggers a part of yourself where it's like, well, yeah, maybe I did that, but this is why. He started to explain himself through and past the request. And I had to ask certain questions of her and him to kind of continuously try to wrap him back around to the fact, yes, we understand why you're presenting this information, but in this moment, all there is a request from your wife to be more forthright. When you recognize her energy shifts, ask why. And I was able to ask her, do you understand where he's coming from? She says yes. I said, with that being said, do you still want him to take that risk? Because when he asks you how you feeling, you may black on him. Do you want him to be able to take that risk? She's like, yes. I'm like, do you understand that? He started to explain again, and we had to like work through it, but he finally got to the point where he realized his perspective was not wrong at all. It was a different approach, a different universe, but he got to the point to be able to look her in her eyes and say, I understand that request. I can honor that. Whatever he had to say about why he wasn't doing that yet, in that moment, it wasn't yet necessary. Maybe a day later, you have that conversation. I've been thinking about this. In that moment, she just wanted to know, can you honor this? So a lot of times when you develop this skill set, you'll be able to hear your partner a lot better. I even said in that session, it correlated to when Candace let me know how she wants her apologies. When you apologize, it may be a lot of other nuances involved that you would like to express. But in the moment when you say sorry, let me just allow myself to receive that. Give that apology space and time to like really bloom into my system. So if 2 days later you do want to revisit those nuances, you do want to express that, now I got this buffer of the fact that you really let my apology breathe. I was able to recognize how I wasn't doing that in that moment with that gentleman on that session. So everything heightens as far as your ability to listen, hear, and communicate what you got to say.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful.
Yeah. You got anything else?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, as far as what's going on, so retreats is done up. They sold out. We appreciate all our attendees. We got 2 sold out retreats once again. We had planned on doing one in October. We didn't get the response we was looking for as far as the couples retreat, so maybe we'll try to hash that out again next year. But if you are in the Houston area, we just launched Sundays with Source. Last week, a beautiful experience. We already, I think, got almost 40 people signed up for the next one. So the next one, if you are in the Texas area or if you can get to Texas, we got people talking about flying in just for this event. June 11th, 9:19 a.m. to about 11:30ish. Donation based. If you ain't got $1 to donate, come anyway. Invite your friends, your family. We're gonna have meditation, nature walk, the medicine of each other as far as the community, sound bowl therapy, journaling. It's a beautiful, comprehensive event that really usually will have a high price point. We just kind of like, reciprocate if you can, but if not, come get this energy and this love. And we will be doing this bi-weekly every second and fourth Sunday when we are in town.
Right. Yep. That's it.
The book, Remembering Me, pretty much 500 copies sold plus, right? And you will also be launching your book club this week.
So this Wednesday, every Wednesday, if through the Instagram subscription, you'll be able to join me with the book club. And so what happens is I've gotten so much beautiful feedback from my book. First of all, everybody who has purchased my book, that has supported, thank you so much. This was my first book, and I put a lot of energy into it. And now doing the book club is to allow people into my psyche that was the propeller of me writing this book, so they are understanding. And also I recognize that when you read a book, you don't just read it from the perspective of the writer.
Right.
It allows certain things within you to surface. So I'm getting so many questions on how do I heal this, or what if a trauma surfaces but I don't really remember all of the details, how do I heal it? And then, so many other questions. As we go through the book chapter by chapter, we'll be able to work through those questions with Q&As. You'll be able to share with the community what you experienced or what came up for you. And that way it's just a dialogue about how this book is impacting you, how it's affecting you, what you're learning from it. And then also you'll receive assignments after each chapter, because each chapter is an invitation for us to go deeper within ourselves, because it's a different topic. So that starts Wednesday. Every Wednesday you can sign up through my Instagram account. When you go to my page, it says subscription. You just sign up for the subscription, and we'll do that every Wednesday.
Right. And then on my end, I'm accepting new clients for couples counseling, one-on-one therapy, familial counseling, and meditation mentoring. And I'm probably going to take a pause on my virtual sessions because we got a lot going on this summer. I'll let y'all know when that's back. Also, one last thing, if you guys would like to sponsor episodes, if you have a business, a platform, or organization that you would like to promote, we have a pretty good reach, not just with the actual podcast episodes, but when we clip it up, we doing 1 million, sometimes 500,000 views on a lot of the stuff that we throw up. So you got a lot of eyes on the stuff that we're putting out. Thank God that's the case, but we would like to share that with you guys. So if you want some of the details on how to be able to sponsor an episode, what that will cost you, what that will look like, please shoot me or Candace a DM and we can discuss that.
Yep, absolutely.
Yep. So episode 13 in the books, and continue to hit us up for with topics that you would like us to talk about on forthcoming episodes.
Yes.
Thank you guys.
All right, y'all. Talk to y'all soon.
Peace.